All right, hi everyone. It is Miss Johnson. I'm going to walk you through our lesson today on an author's syntax. So students will be able to analyze an author's or speaker's style and syntax to better understand their purpose and message. As I'm going through these slides, make sure you have your method of note-taking available for you. If you need to come back to this video or come back to the slides, this is available for you to do. So syntax, there's a lot of vocabulary words that we're going to go over today. Syntax in itself is the order of words or phrases in creating a sentence. So there are words that we can use to describe an author's syntax. We can look at sentence types. We can look at sentence length, sentence structure, and other techniques that characterize syntax. So we will be going over these 4 categories today in our lesson. So sentence types, a sentence can be studied for its types. Is it declarative, interrogative, exclamatory, or imperative? If you have a declarative sentence, you have an assertive statement. So an example might be something like, I need the sugar. You can think of a declarative sentence. I always think of it as like you are declaring something. Okay. Next one, interrogative. It asks a question. What helps me with this one is I think of like an interrogation. If you've ever watched like any of those crime shows or detective shows, I guess, when they interrogate somebody, they're asking them questions. That's what helps me. So an example for this would be, could you please pass the sugar? Another thing that helps me with that is if there's a question mark, it's a question, meaning it's interrogative. Exclamatory expresses an emotion. So exclamatory, I think of an exclamation point. I told you to pass the sugar, right? And then last one, imperative. This is authoritative. There's a command here. An example would be pass the sugar, right? You are commanding somebody to do something. Our second category is all about sentence length. So questions you can ask yourself, does the sentence length fit the subject matter? What variety of lengths is present? And why is the sentence length effective? So 3 types we're going to learn about. First is that lovely word there. It's staccato. So repeat after me, staccato. There's the pronunciation there for you too. So staccato syntax, it's a series of short, very abrupt sentences. They're 1 or 2 words, right? Maybe 3 in a sentence. The effect of this, meaning it's forceful, it's direct, and it gets to the point. Telegraphic sentences or telegraphic syntax, fewer than 8 words in a sentence, typically omit grammatical functions sometimes, meaning like you might write these things as like notes, right? Quick notes for somebody, or like texting sometimes. Example, leave on doorstep or will arrive tomorrow. The effect of this is forceful, direct, and again to the point. Last one for sentence length, long and involved syntax. This could be like more than 30 words in a sentence. The effect of this, meaning is not completed until the end of the sentence. So you might have this, like, for example, in Just Mercy, when Brian is describing certain events that are happening, he typically uses long and involved syntax. Sentence structure. So what's important to note here, I'm hoping this is a little bit of a review. Clauses. An independent clause is the main clause of a sentence. It expresses a complete thought and can stand alone as a sentence. Versus a dependent clause, it does not express a complete thought and cannot stand alone as a sentence. So there are subordinate conjunctions are the first words in many dependent clauses. So when you see one of these words at the beginning of a clause, you can, you know that is a dependent clause. These are going to come into play in a moment here when we learn about different sentence structures. A sentence can be studied for its structure. Is it simple, compound, complex, or compound complex? So I've given you some examples, the definition, and effect, which is important for us in AP. So a simple sentence has 1 independent clause. The effect, it's very like childlike quality, highlights importance among long sentences. Example, the boys were already in the classroom. There's only 1 independent clause there. Number 2, a compound sentence, 2 independent clauses. The effect of this, it's a balanced sentence when you read it out loud. there are ideas of equal importance. The boys were already in the classroom and they began to work. Next one, complex sentences, one independent clause and one or more dependent clauses. The effect of this, it's longer, it's more complex. There are more ideas in that sentence. Example, the boys who were already in the classroom began to work. Number 4, compound complex, 2 independent clauses and 1 or more dependent clause. The effect of this is longer and again, more complex. We see a lot of these examples and sentences in Just Mercy when again, Brian is describing certain events. Periodic sentences withhold the completion of the main thought until near the end. They carry high tension and they build suspense. That's the effect of this one. You can read through the examples to see what I mean by that. Loose sentences state the main thought of the sentence near the beginning in an independent clause. Then other independent clauses or dependent clauses or phrases are attached, okay? So in loose sentences, the tension is relieved right away, leaving the reader to explore the rest of the sentence. Okay, so you can take a look at this example. The tension is relieved, the problem is solved, and then we can read on. So we're not like, there's no like suspense that's building throughout these loose sentences. And finally, a balanced sentence employs parallel structure of approximately the same length and importance. So the effect of balanced sentences, I want you to think about parallelism. It creates symmetry and balance between ideas and sentences. It often involves repetition. It often is like a list of things that the author is trying to convey. And then finally, other rhetorical choices. So add this to your list of rhetorical choices that we've talked about in class. These specific rhetorical choices all have to do with sentence structure. So juxtaposition is placing things side by side for the purpose of comparison. Authors often use juxtaposition of ideas or examples in order to make a point. So it's kind of like, think about, I always think about like the yin and yang symbol. For example, like an author might juxtapose the average day of a typical American with that of someone in the third world in order to make a point of social commentary. Rhetorical questions, questions not asked for information, but for effect. Like when I was a little kid, my parents always asked me rhetorical questions. Like in this example, the angry parent asked the child, "Are you finished interrupting me?" I feel like my mom used to use those all the time when she'd get mad at me. Repeat after me, anaphora. I know it looks like anaphora, but it is anaphora. This is the repetition of a word or phrase or clause at the beginning of 2 or more sentences or clauses in a row. This is a deliberate form of repetition and helps make the writer's point more coherent. I came, I saw, I conquered. When you're looking at anaphora, you are looking at specifically the beginning of a sentence or the beginning of a clause to see if there's any repetition of words there. And then we've already gone over parallelism in class along with repetition. And so I put those on there. You can absolutely talk about those 2 rhetorical choices when you're talking about sentence structure. Okay. Use these slides as you are working through the guided practice today. Come back to this video if you need to review your notes or to review the lesson.